What up, kinfolk? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I wanted to share with you a little bit about my failed marriage. I've done so much introspective work, really dealing with the Lord about where I was emotionally and mentally before, during, and after my marriage. I thought this would be really great to share with you guys because the response to my divorce and all of the women emailing me telling me that they are in or have been in a similar situation as I was in was literally mind-blowing. So many people asked for advice on how to deal and cope in these types of situations. And while I tried to help in the best way I knew how, I wasn't healed yet myself, and I was working through my own emotional baggage concerning my divorce. Now I can say that I am on the other side. After 2 years, I'm at a place where I can confidently say that I am totally and completely healed. Thank God. And I wanted to share my experiences with you guys in hopes of helping anyone who watches. I feel like a lot of people go through really tough relationship experiences, but no one shares the emotional journey with total transparency. If more people took a step back to evaluate exactly where they are mentally and emotionally before getting married, then I truly believe more people would pause and not make the same mistake that I did. In this video, I also want to explain why I myself didn't take a step back and pause before taking that leap into marriage at the time that I did. So if you're interested in hearing my emotional journey before my failed marriage, then keep watching. Okay, so let's start at the beginning when my ex-husband and I started to get to know each other. For the sake of his privacy, we'll call him Kyle. I'm gonna be 100% honest with you and say that I had no business getting involved with anyone. But at that time, I was completely aware of that, and I had zero intentions and zero desire to date anyone at all. I had just gotten out of a relationship about a month before. This relationship was a heavy one, the one before Kyle. This was someone that I was with for about 3 years. It was a very up and down relationship. It was good in a lot of ways, but it was incredibly destructive. The man that I was with was very manipulative, and he was very mentally and emotionally abusive. During the time that I got to know Kyle, I was in a place of extreme anger towards my ex-boyfriend. I broke up with him 3 separate times, and each time he would get his act together and reel me back in by treating me the way that I deserved to be treated. Then once he got me back in his good graces, he would revert back to his old ways. But the last time I broke up with him, I was in a place of complete and total exhaustion. I had no more left in me. I was so broken and insecure, and after things didn't work out with him, I no longer trusted my own judgment. That relationship, though, was an incredibly important one for me to experience. I learned so much about myself, just like I did in every relationship I was in. One of those lessons being that I have an enormous capacity to love completely unconditionally, with a godly love, and I was proud of myself for that because in marriage, I feel like that's something a lot of people lack. But also, in retrospect, I can see that the mental and emotional abuse is not completely his fault. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. He's totally wrong for treating me the way that he did, but I can't deny the responsibility that's mine in the situation. I had the option to stay and allow him to treat me that way or to walk away, and I chose to stay instead of respecting myself enough to choose me and let him go. I wrote a whole blog about this if you want to go check it out at www.ShannaMarieB.com. Go check it out and let me know what you think. I could go on and on about what I learned in that relationship, but that's a whole nother video, and I won't get into it here. But after I broke up with this ex of mine, I spent so much time in my prayer room asking the Lord for clarity and direction. I felt very lost because even though that relationship was not a healthy one for me to be in, this was someone who I thought I was going to end up with. When I was with him, I had peace I had never felt in any other relationship, which was why walking away was so hard for me. But instead of trusting the Lord in that relationship and standing up for myself more, I made the relationship an idol in my life. And because of that, I really had a tough time trusting my own judgment. So I decided moving forward that I would consult the people I trusted the most before making any huge decisions. So that is where I was before I got to know Kyle and what I had been going through before him. So one day I was at church with the rest of the praise team that I was on, and we were about to go out and lead worship. Kyle was backstage, and I had known of him for the last 3 years, but he was very awkward. And even though I thought he was really attractive, I wasn't in the least bit interested in getting to know him, if I'm being honest. Missy, being one of my closest friends, had gone through the entire journey with the last guy, with me, and she really challenged me to let go of all of the ridiculous restrictions that I set for dating. I never really wanted to date a white guy, and I also never wanted to date a police officer, and Kyle was both. But she told me that I could really be missing out on someone so amazing by having those restrictions. So she encouraged me to let go of my narrow-mindedness and allow myself to experience something new. At first I resisted, but I took that to the Lord. I thought maybe she was right. Side note, I am in no way, shape, or form blaming anyone but myself in saying this. This is just what happened and what I was thinking during the process. But I take full responsibility for all of the decisions that I have made, just to be clear. So I told the Lord that the next Sunday, I'm going to position myself for Kyle to talk to me. And if he does, then I'll engage in the conversation. But if he doesn't, then I'll just keep it moving because I really didn't want him to anyway. So the next Sunday came and I did what I said I would do. I positioned myself for him to speak to me, and he did. It was a little awkward because he was just a little bit socially awkward just in general, but the conversation was really nice. So I entertained it, and from then on, we text every day throughout the day, every single day. I learned that he was actually super funny and he was really easy to talk to. He was consistent and down to earth, and I really started liking him quickly. Going from a guy who never made me a priority and having deep and emotional conversation was like pulling teeth, to this new guy who made things so easy. I didn't even want him to like me, so I had no fears about being totally myself, but he liked it, and it was actually really refreshing. So the first time that Kyle and I hung out, I told him that I had just gotten out of a bad relationship and that I needed time to heal before moving into a new one. I didn't want him to feel like this was gonna go anywhere. I just wasn't ready. I spent so much of our past conversations about past relationships talking about my ex, so I really figured he wouldn't want to be with someone who had so much baggage, and I was really okay with him feeling that way. But I enjoyed getting to know him, and since we had fitness in common, I was also excited to have a new workout partner. The more we hung out, the more we liked each other, and I ended up feeling like he was my best friend. I mean, he was my best friend, and he was amazing. People even noticed I was happier. I felt alive again, and I felt cared for, which is something they didn't see when I was with the last guy. As time went on and my feelings got more involved, I began to talk with my mentor Dory, you guys met Dory, my mom, and Andrea about him, and all that I was feeling concerning him. I was actually pretty shocked at how supportive they were about me dating him, especially because of the last one. Dory was the only one that said that I needed to take at least 1 full year to work through the damage done by my ex, especially since there was so much emotionally invested in that relationship. But the more I told her about him, the more she began to get excited for me. And that was actually shocking for me. So I took that actually as a sign that it was okay to move forward with Kyle. Even though I was only about a month out of the last relationship, it was one of those things where the relationship was over before it ended. You know what I mean? Like, I was already emotionally done like several months before I actually pulled the trigger and broke it off. Andrea and my mom knew this already, so they were just excited that I was in a healthy relationship and not with my ex anymore. But they also knew my hesitation about Kyle. But my reasons were not really valid reasons to not be with someone. I mean, it was kind of shallow, the fact that I was so against him being white and being a police officer. Like, they just didn't think that was a really valid reason to not want to be with someone. The fact that he was a white man was something that actually really bothered me, only because it was different. My entire life, I've only dated black men, so I was used to that type. I never found myself attracted to white men to the point to where I could see myself being in a relationship with one. But it was because I had these preconceived notions about what white men liked in women, and I did not fit that mold. I've always felt like white men like little small framed women, and I'm definitely not that girl. But also the cultural differences were something that I was really concerned about. Black and white culture is very different, as you all know, and I never wanted to have to explain myself to anyone. I wanted someone who understood certain phrases and certain jokes, and someone I didn't have to explain everything to, if that makes sense. It's just different, and different is not comfortable, but I was also aware that these limitations could prevent me from experiencing something truly amazing. I was completely honest with him about how I was feeling and what my thought process was during this time, one thing that I can say 100% is that I was honest about who I was, and I did not hide my flaws at all. I wanted him to know these things so that he could make the decision for himself whether this was something that he wanted to deal with or not. So during this time, I was dealing with residual emotions from my last relationship. I mean, obviously, I just got out of it, but getting into another relationship does not heal you from the last one. So many people jump from one relationship to another thinking that the other person will heal them. I wasn't thinking that he was gonna heal me, but I don't think that I really realized at that point just how much damage was actually done by my last relationship. And because I didn't expect the situation with Kyle to go anywhere, I thought it was okay for us to just be friends. During the dating period, I did notice some things that raised a red flag. And I know I've talked to you guys about red flags, and I've never told you guys exactly what they were. I admit that I have a tendency to be really critical of guys that I date, though. I mean, I'm pretty critical sometimes. Not just for the sake of being critical, but because I take dating really seriously. And so many people just overlook these things that seem so insignificant. But really, those silly things are glimpses into who someone truly is. And I never wanted to be someone who ignores these things. And I didn't ignore them with Kyle. I did not ignore them at all with Kyle. I actually consulted with my people about these things. So a few of the examples. One was we had a conversation about music, and you know the whole like, what kind of music do you listen to conversation. I told him that I did not listen to secular music that much. If I do, it's usually like 90s or early 2000s R&B, but it's very rare that I do. And I don't judge anyone that does. It's just not what I choose to fill my mind with. I also told him that when I make my long drive to work, I usually sit in silence or listen to a sermon or something like that. And he immediately was like, oh, me too. Like, I don't listen to secular music either. Except for when I work out, then I listen to like Eminem or something. And I don't usually listen to anything in the car either. So I was like, oh, wow. We really are on the same page here. That's kind of crazy. Maybe he's more amazing than I think. But then every single time we'd get in his car, he would turn the car on and the radio would come on. It would be a secular radio station playing. So I'm like, I didn't come out and say anything, but I did take mental notes and I talked with my people about it. And that's when they thought I was being ridiculous and just trying to find something wrong with him. It wasn't the fact that he listened to secular music that bothered me though. It was the fact that he lied about it. And that caused me to side-eye him like, what's the point of lying about it though? But I thought that maybe there was a reason for it and that maybe my people are right and I'm just being ridiculous. Another time was when I said I don't like Cracker Barrel. I know this probably sounds really stupid, but I said I didn't like Cracker Barrel and he was like, oh, I don't either. And I'm like, yeah, it's gross, right? And he's like, yeah, I don't like it either. But then later on, I remember he was having a conversation with someone and they were talking about how they loved Cracker Barrel and he was like, oh, me too. And I'm like, again, I didn't say anything. I just took mental notes and I talked to my people about it. I told them that I was concerned that he might be the kind of person who tries to be who he thinks you want him to be instead of who he truly is. And like maybe he wasn't confident about like just being 100% himself, liking what he likes and what he doesn't like. Like maybe he just wasn't comfortable enough in his skin to be confident in who he truly was, basically. The issue for me was his level of authenticity and self-awareness and the fact that he could have potentially lied about these things. I just didn't see the point in lying about something so stupid and it was really concerning to me. But because I didn't trust my own judgment, I chose to let these things go and stop trying to find something wrong with him. There were plenty of other things like that I saw as red flags, but I chose to ignore because I thought my woundedness from my last relationship was keeping me from giving him a fair chance because everything else was so amazing. Things in this relationship began to move really quickly. I mean, we went one day, and this was my idea actually. I just thought it would be fun, like, cause I actually like to go look at houses. So one day we went to go look at houses, and it was just for fun. Like, I just wanted to see what his taste was like, and if we shared similar desires in homes. It was really innocent. It was just meant to be just another way to get to know each other. So we went and we found a house that was so perfect. It was in the building stages. It was, they call it a spec home. So everything had already been chosen for this particular house, and everything except for a couple of things were exactly what we both wanted in a house, including the location. So we left thinking like, oh my gosh, should we go for this? The pastor of the church which is a whole other story. He really encouraged us to, why wait? Just go for it. You're a great guy. You're a great girl. Just go for it. What are you waiting for? And I never cared for our pastor because there was always something about him that I just didn't like. He just didn't seem like a really authentic person, and he wasn't always the kindest person either. So at first, when I found out that Kyle loved him and looked up to him, I actually took that as a red flag, which now in retrospect, again, I was right, but I didn't trust my judgment and I thought I was being petty and I let it go. The fact that I even entertained the why wait mentality just shows right there that I was not in the right mental place to even be getting into a relationship, let alone getting married. But in that moment, when we were like looking at this house, we both had such strong feelings for each other, and we thought like, maybe he's right. And Kyle had his own share of like silly restrictions, one being body type. So we thought that maybe we should really consider this. When we found this house, there were a few things about it that the Lord would have had to make a way out of no way really to change, because I was really picky. I'm really picky about where I live. You guys know that by now. But there were a few things that I wanted to change, which I didn't think that we were going to be able to. So I told the Lord, I'm like, please, Lord, just make a way out of no way. If this is for me, if this is the right decision to make, then I trust that you're going to let us be able to make these changes to the house. And literally everything unfolded so beautifully. I mean, we got everything that we wanted. I really felt like the Lord was rolling out the red carpet for me. Long story short, we ended up going for it, and we decided that we would go ahead and just take this leap of faith. I was freaking out. I was freaking out. I really loved him. He was so amazing, and we grew so close in this time. But these seemingly insignificant red flags were almost haunting me. But I continued to talk about these issues with my people, and they still thought that I was being ridiculous. With everything that the Lord did in all of this time, all of the specific prayers that I prayed and that he answered to a T, I thought maybe they're right and I'm just tripping. I addressed these concerns with Dory. She told me to take my time, and she told me not to move forward until I had total peace. But also, she told me that I really need to think about how God had opened so many amazing doors and not to ignore that. And I remember, like, when I texted her back, my immediate response was, Satan opens doors too. She thought I was being so ridiculous, but still just told me, take your time and bring your concerns to the Lord and just slow down, just take your time. I knew that the thought of not being with Kyle made me so sad. It made me really sad because I really loved him. He was the most amazing guy I had ever met. So when I weighed the pros and the cons, everything that concerned me seemed so trivial in that moment. So I decided to stop overthinking things, because I always blame myself for being overcomplicated, and I chose to move forward with him. And even with all of my anxiety, I was still so excited to spend my life with him. So to sum it all up, before we got married, like I've said so many times before, I just didn't trust myself. And because of that, I decided to trust in what other people were saying. I have a tendency to overanalyze everything. And the mistake that I made often was to talk everything over with my closest people. I have learned the hard way that even though it's really important to have godly counsel in your life, people close to you who you can really trust, and if you need to talk things out, you talk to those people. But it's also really important to discern what is necessary to seek counsel about and what isn't. There will be many things in life that the Lord speaks to you that is meant for you and God alone. While seeking godly counsel can be good sometimes, there will be times where their counsel can be not so great because the people closest to you love you. They want the best for you. But sometimes that can hinder things that the Lord is saying. What God requires of us isn't always going to make sense. It won't make sense to us, so it definitely won't make sense to those who love you. Not everyone will understand or agree with what you feel the Holy Spirit is saying, but sometimes it's not for them to understand. Most of the time, it's not meant for them to understand. For me, because they knew that I had a tendency to choose men who weren't always the best for me, they saw me so happy and it seemed so healthy. So then it looked like I was just so used to being treated poorly that I couldn't handle being treated right. Which in retrospect, we know that isn't true. With all those red flags, I was actually hearing from the Lord. But to them, I was just being ridiculous, and it looked as though I was just trying to find something wrong with him. They only wanted the best for me, and they were encouraging me to stop hindering my own happiness. But if I would have trusted the Holy Spirit speaking to me, then I could have avoided a whole lot of heartbreak. And as I've said before, I know that I was supposed to go through this process because even though it was absolutely horrible, it was so bad. It completely transformed who I am. If I had to go through it all over again to become who I am today, then I would go through it again. But I wanted to share with you where I was mentally and emotionally in this process in the hopes that it will help other women to not make the same mistakes that I made. Because even though I know this experience for me was necessary for my spiritual growth, there are things that I shouldn't have ignored. I shouldn't have ignored all the red flags, obviously, but I also should not at all been even getting to know anyone so soon after breaking up with a man who I thought I would end up with. That relationship did so much damage to me emotionally, and not trusting my own judgment because of that relationship was reason enough to not have gotten into another relationship until I worked that out with the Lord. It wasn't fair for me, but it also wasn't fair to Kyle. Even though I told him that I wasn't in a place where I should be in a relationship, that wasn't a decision for him to make for me. I should have protected his heart by just knowing myself enough to know that I needed more time to work through the events of my last relationship. He's not innocent in this situation, but I do take full responsibility for where I was wrong in all of this too. So in next week's video, I'm going to talk about where I was mentally and emotionally on the wedding day and while we were married. So make sure to subscribe and hit the notification button if you want to get notified when that video gets posted. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you next week for my failed marriage during the marriage. Bye guys.